So I'd love to hear, are there any other ways that you anchor your truth, your why, and your ability to keep on going even when you're in the midst of heartache or trial?
Yes, I love that. So thinking about just the impact or the results that people have experienced because of the way that you show up, like that blessing. I often, I'll call them, and I learned this from one of my mentors within Life on Fire, actually. They would call it your moment on fire. So I like to call them like your one moment, like your WON, your one moment that you experience where you can use that as your anchors, like before, like when you feel that heartbeat, right? Like we were talking about earlier, that heavy heartbeat, or you're going to experience, going on a podcast with Tamra Andress, which is going to be awesome. You experience your one moment and you get into that state of like, basically your one moment is a time in your life where it's like that mountaintop type experience where you've created a result where, whether that's in somebody else's life or God really blessed you with a result or blessed you with a gift yourself. And so I often like to anchor to that as well and like relive it. So one of the moments that I like to relive is just, I love sports. It's kind of funny being a coach. Like I absolutely love sports. I kind of dedicate, like my coaching journey was because of sports originally.
Cool.
But anyways, it was just a moment that I experienced when I was younger, where my father, right before a baseball game, kind of little league major baseball game, I was pitching in the championship game, and I was warming up in the bullpen, throwing ball after ball, and he can tell I was really, really nervous. Had those jitters, those butterfly jitters, right? He comes over and he writes on the inside of my wrist, ATDS. And I looked at him, I was like, what does that mean? ATDS, what's that? And he says, Austin the Demon Slayer. And he's like, whenever you're on the mound, I was really into video games, vivid imagination. He's like, whenever you're on the mound, I literally want you to visualize every time you throw a strike, it's like you're conquering that demon. You're conquering that fear. You're slaying a demon every time you throw a strike. I was like, that's kind of cool.
Please tell me you have that tattooed on your actual body right now.
So I'm going to get that tattooed. I'm actually going to have my dad. He's pretty creative. He's very artistic. So he's going to draw up like ATDS and then I'll get it tatted right on the inside of my wrist. Yeah. So cool. So I would literally on the mound, I mean, talk about the power of visualization, like vision. Like vision is so important. I'll hit a little bit more on vision here in a second, but I would visualize. I would just before my throw, I would sit here with the mitt, right, and just take a moment, close my eyes, take a deep breath in, and visualize me throwing a strike, and it's like a dagger, kind of piercing a demon, basically, and literally just pitch after pitch, pitch after pitch, and it was just crazy, awesome game. Won the game ball, scored the win, like just all sorts of crazy stuff that was awesome, and it was stemmed from that, and so. I just use this as an example, like to for anyone to dial in on like their one, and we have multiple one moments in our life, but for this one, like what I'll do is before like a talk, a speaking engagement, before an event, before anything where I experience that heavy heartbeat, where I know there's going to be this breakthrough, I just get into that state where I literally stand like this, close my eyes, and just take a deep breath in, and that's it. And it gets me into that kind of elevated state to perform ultimately to where God is leading me. So,
well, I love that it was actually from your father, like Abba, right? Like that's so good. And most little boys as men don't even have that connection point. So it's hard for them sometimes when we think about the love of our Father and the intentionality of our Father. And I could totally see God literally telling us, right? We have dominion. We are the head and not the tail. You are a demon slayer. Like that is so cool. And what a testimony for your dad to hold on to as a memory for one of his one moments, right? I told you before we jumped on that I had just gotten back from Atlanta for my son's first like international Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournament. He's done many tournaments, but never to this caliber. And he was in his bullpen and I was just watching his nerves and the breath work that he was practicing and the visualization visualization that he was practicing. And we always talk about him being like our little David, because he's surely the smallest in so many ways. And yet he is a warrior. He wins. He won all 3 of his matches based on subs and like submissions for a little guy like that. I think people underestimate his size. And this is truly for somebody who's listening, is like, there are going to be plenty of people that underestimate you. And there might be times that you even underestimate you. And what Austin and I are talking about and so passionate about is like, it's a step of obedience. It's a step of obedience to step onto the mound. It's a step of obedience for Cooper to step onto the mat. It's a step of obedience for you to go live. It's a step of obedience for you to actually say out loud what it is that you want to become. You might not be there yet, but if you want to be a world champion, if you want to have 1 million followers, the only way that you're ever going to get there is if you get one, right? Yeah. And so I love being removed from the numbers game, but knowing that numbers, because we serve a God of multiplication, are going to blow your mind when you're willing to be obedient.
Yeah. That's really good. That's good. That's really good. And it kind of ties back into, I think, really the importance of vision. Like God will give us a vision, and he doesn't give us all those details, but what we can do is we can take that vision and apply it to the GPS strategy and really just be bold in taking that next step. Like I feel like there's so many entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs where they get caught up in that vision and it leaves them stuck. It leaves them paralyzed, because it's like, God is calling me to this very grand, great, huge vision. How do I even go? How do I ever go there?
How do I ever go there? She said, I just want to like sit at your feet and learn everything, because you're living my dream. And I said, oh no, I'm not. And she just like kind of froze, and she's like, no, you are. Like, I want to be a writer and a speaker. And I was like, that's awesome. But just as Mother Teresa said in this book, we are unrepeatable. Like literally, you cannot repeat this moment. You can't. And when I heard that, I'm like, wow, how simple and yet how profound. We say we're unreplaceable, irreplaceable as people. And I believe that too. There's no DNA that has ever been like your DNA. And so it's necessary for us to realize the power of our purpose. And at the same time, even when you have a coach, which it sounds like you've invested in multiple, that's something that I'm really passionate about. Like if you're a coach or you're a trainer or you're a teacher, you have your own teachers, trainers, and coaches. And if you don't, you should question. So when you're even interviewing someone, be like, who have you coached underneath? Who have you trained underneath? Talk about these testimonials that are anchoring points for us. Because if people don't have that, there's a bit of some questionability, other than, like you said, Austin, it's only a step ahead. So if they have something you want, they might be the exact person, and you might be the very first person that they coach. What a testimony. What an element for you both to be in tandem, in duality of that success, that one story together. As you were talking, the one thing I want to like land home with here as we round out the conversation is a lot of this stuff takes resources, right? It takes time, it takes intentionality, it takes getting in the word, it takes unpacking and spending that energy towards the GPS strategy. But one of those things that it takes is finances. And so I want to hear, when you help people from not only an organic growth strategy, because everyone wants to do it organic, but I also know that you know a lot about the paid marketing strategies online as well. Help us understand, like, when do we know it's the right time to invest from a paid marketing perspective online? And what are some of those options like?
Yeah, that's a really good one. One thing, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, where I was really excited to produce a lot of content without having my core down. And I see that a lot with entrepreneurs, and where they get really excited, but they don't have the core, which is basically that vision and mindset. Ultimately, the core, I often like to say there's a 4 core to your core, which is who you are, who you serve, how you serve them, and why you serve them. So who you are, who you serve, how you serve them, and why you serve them. When you can get really dialed in on those, then when you produce content, you have a solid foundation that's going to basically like when you produce that content, your core, your vision, who you serve, how you serve them is going to be amplified through your content. And so whenever you start, I always recommend, like, when you produce organic content, you can see what lands with people, and then you can take that organic content to turn it into a paid strategy that's effective. So if that's, obviously, you're doing it yourself, or you can find somebody like myself who knows what they're doing online when it comes to paid advertising to be able to work with, to dial in. But sometimes it can be it can be too soon if you don't have your core down, because you'll spend money in paid ads and it'll just land nowhere because you don't really have that dialed in, you don't really have that down. And so I always suggest, working with somebody first and foremost who has been there, who has done that, who's an expert at marketing, knows what they're doing, to help you dial in on that. Or if you're looking at doing it yourself, obviously there's learning curves to doing that, but you have to have that core down in order to produce that content. That's super important.